Good afternoon, everyone that is joining us. My name is Lisa Thompson, and I'm joined by my very good friend Mel Blumenthal. And we're going to talk about business exit strategies to protect you and your business. And so, without further ado, my name is Lisa Thompson. I've been practicing business law for 30 years. I write books on LLCs, partnerships, and other business law topics. I've been doing it since 2004. So I stay current because I got to update them annually. I act as in-house counsel to small to medium-sized businesses that do not need full-time counsel. So anything from setup, maintenance, compliance, buy-sell agreements, negotiating contracts, and if you need to, state law dissolution of your business. If you go to our website, I do blog posts a lot on business topics that should affect business owners. So if you want to kind of check that out or sign up for one of our mailing lists, and we will be sending out emails as important topics arise. So here are my disclaimers. This seminar is for educational and informational purposes only. There is no substitute for obtaining legal advice from a qualified business law attorney. You need to talk to someone about your personal circumstances. So I want to give you the overview so you can start thinking about it, but definitely talk to your own business law attorney. And if you don't have one, you should find one so that you have one before you need one. Also, I am not a CPA, so you always need to check the tax ramifications of any legal action with a qualified tax professional. Even an enrolled agent is great. You just need to make sure that there's someone that's qualified to be discussing your business situation. Also, this presentation is not an endorsement by the host of either myself or Mel. Mel, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mel Blumenthal. I am a Series 65 securities licensed and fiduciary financial advisor. I specialize in financial planning, retirement planning for individuals and business owners. I have been in practice for over a decade now. And my disclaimers are very similar to Lisa's. I am not a tax advisor. I only play one on TV. So, of course, whenever possible, please consult your tax advisors before you implement any of the strategies that we will be going over today. So, with that, let's take it away.
So, um, today we're talking about all businesses. So that means sole proprietorships, partnerships, corporations, PCs, LPs, LLPs, LLLPs, PLLCs, and LLCs. The LP is limited partnership, and then it's limited liability partnership and limited liability limited partnership. And if you see P before something, that's just a professional corporation or a professional limited liability company. Mostly, I will be referencing LLCs. They're the most predominant right now. So don't think that I'm excluding the others when I'm speaking. If I am excluding or something only applies to something, I will say so. And when I say you, it just means your business owner, or in fact, you. All right. So our goals today is to discuss the necessity of a strategy for short or and long term in case something happens. What if you are captured by pirates and it takes a while to pay that ransom and come back? You don't want to lose everything because you are temporarily unavailable to run your business. You also, we all are going to die at some point. So you need to have a strategy for what happens. And we're going to discuss various exit strategy options for you and your business so that um, I view it as thwarting Murphy, right? Like if you have the plan, then you can, be secure that you're not going to lose everything if something happens, foreseen or unforeseen. Um, I kind of view it as like I have a will, so hopefully I don't need a will. But if I didn't have a will, then I just, I'm like telling Murphy to have his way. Anyway, so you need to have an exit strategy in your operating agreement, bylaws, or partnership agreement. So, if you're an LLC, you should have an operating agreement, and I don't care if you are a single member LLC or not. You need to have an operating agreement. There's a lot of reasons for that that are too detailed to go into today. So definitely watch the rest of our series. We're going to be talking about that. And I believe that it'll be on the 20th of November that we're going to be talking about essential contracts. And this is a contract between a business owner and the business. Bylaws are what are required by law in the state of Arizona. And that's for corporations. So that's their internal governing document. And partnership agreements are for limited partnerships. Sole proprietorships, it's just either two spouses working together or one person, you know, um, one person, you know, doing business activities without a formal business structure. But still, if you're a sole proprietorship, you need to really think about, what happens if you're unable to work. So, from the beginning, if you can, if you're thinking about starting a business, especially if you're thinking about starting a business, with someone else, you need to think about, what happens if I don't want to do this anymore? Not that you're fighting, that you just I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore, or I want to retire, or I want to, you know, whatever the issue is. You want to think about, what is the way out that lets your business continue. And you also want to plan for the worst case scenario or unforeseen events. So, an exit strategy is what we call a succession plan. And I think people get really confused when they hear the term succession. And I certainly have to double check myself because I can't spell it on my own. Um, so, it's basically a plan for the business owner to leave the business for good or bad. It plans for the what ifs. And some of them you can plan for and some of them you can't. But hopefully, with a good exit strategy, there's enough there where you're going to have security and peace of mind, and your business is going to be able to continue on for quite some time after you no longer want to be a part of it. So, this is where you really need to talk to a qualified business law attorney and also a qualified tax professional and also a qualified financial planner because there's not one size fits all. And all of the things that we're going to talk about, they fit together. So there's a tax ramification, there's a retirement ramification, and then there's the legal ramification. So there's not, you can't go online and be like, this is the master exit strategy. Like it doesn't exist. Um, the one that's good for everyone. So I really stress that this is all about making educated decisions. I don't care what your strategy is, so long as you've really thought it through. If you're on your own and you're a solo, you're a single member LLC, you've thought about, um, what's going to happen. Or if you have another member, so it's a two-person LLC, then you've really thought about what it is that you want to do and you're making an educated decision. You can explain why. Why is it that we chose to do this way or that way? All right. So it needs to be written. You can't just talk to your friend Mel and be like, Mel, in our business, this is what we're going to do, and let's shake hands, right? And do the thumbs up, right? That's not enough. Um, nobody would get married if they thought they were gonna get divorced. Everybody is a big heart when they start a business. They love everyone. And the reality is a business in a sense is like a marriage. Like you spend a lot of time, blood, sweat, and tears working on this thing. You need to write it down. And what I tell everyone is if you're going into business with someone that will not write it down, they are going to not honor the terms. And here's the other thing. Like, I can't remember what I had for breakfast 3 days ago. Um, you know, I you might not remember what you said. And you might have this very specific memory of something that's incorrect. So you really just want to write it down from the beginning. Also, having it written down shows that you follow corporate formality, which protects you personally from liability from creditors. It also you can change things if you need to. If you have if you guys write something down and then later you have the 3 o'clock in the morning moment of like, that doesn't make any sense, then, change it. That's fine. Um, Also, having a written document for your business is going to protect you from creditors, and it will also detail your succession plan, and it will also detail who, in fact, owns what percentage of your company, or if a corporation, like how many shares of stock everybody has. All right. So I talk about this stuff all the time, and everyone's like, yeah, 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 it's not going to happen to me. And we all do that because we're human. But this came across my desk, and I had numerous examples, but I'm only sharing one with you. So this business owner held 96% ownership in his LLC. He had a 4% silent business owner, and they were what we call member managed, which means both members got to manage the company. And the 96% owner went on this great vacation with his lovely wife, and and they had gotten a trust in an effort to, you know, get their estate plan up and running, and they were going to have the trust own the business, and then that way if something happened to him, then through the trust it would pass to her, and it everything would be good. And this is a multi-million dollar company. I mean, this it's like they have money, they're an ongoing concern. And they never updated their operating agreement when they decided to do this transfer of ownership to trust. And they also never actually transferred the ownership to trust, the ownership of the LLC to trust. They just kind of were like, yeah, we got a trust, we're going to do that. They had written an assignment, which is just not enough. You have to have it on record that your trust owns this. And he's on vacation and he dies. And he wasn't an old guy. He wasn't an elder. He flat out just, had a freak accident and died. And at which point, the silent owner that owned 4% decided that he was going to take control of the company and cut the wife out of management. So now they're in litigation over the valuation and control of the business. There's a probate that started, even though there's a trust, because the ownership interest was not put in the trust appropriately. So, and the business is struggling financially because the 4% owner doesn't really know what he's doing. So, take this seriously, because again, it's like, okay, yeah, 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 it's not going to happen to me. Oh, I formed the trust. We'll do this later. You have to put the pieces together. All right, so here are key considerations for your exit strategy from my side, and then Mel's going to talk about from her side, and then she'll continue this into um for next week at noon, from noon to 1. So, all right, so contemplate your best case scenario. So succession plans and exit strategies are not all bad. Like, what happens if you want to retire? What happens if you want to sell? Have you positioned yourself correctly? Are you ready to be scrutinized through due diligence? And this also means that you should have, um, be making sure that your records are kept up to date and all of those types of things. But you definitely want to think about if you want to leave either from retirement, or you're just like, I don't want to sell widgets anymore. Like, I'm done. No more widgets. Or like, no tacos. Like, I can't make another taco, right? Like, you want to get out. How do you do that? Are you going to sell your business to someone else? Are you going to sell the assets to someone else? Are you going to, do you want your employees to take it over? What is it that you want to do? And you want to always be positioning yourself for that. You also want to contemplate your worst case scenarios. I sometimes call myself the doom and gloom girl because when I'm doing a contract for one of my clients, I'm starting at the what is the worst thing that can happen, and I'm working back because I want to know how I can defend the contract if something really bad happens. So I talk about the 5 Ds: divorce, death, disability, destruction, and dissolution. You really got to think about what happens if any of these 5 things happen. Your exit strategy or your plan for your business for, the unforeseen or the things that we don't want to have happen, but because it's life, sometimes they do, you need to plan for those. You also want to think about reverse piercing the corporate veil. Have you structured your business so that no creditors can take your personal ownership of the business? And most small business owners don't even think about that. Um, you really want to think about, are you temporarily unavailable to manage your business? What's going to happen? And what happens if you're permanently unable to manage your business? So you just really need to think through those things. And I was single for a lot of years and I don't have kids. And and I'm also an attorney, so I can't have anybody but other licensed attorneys be involved in my business. And so I really had to think hard about how I was going to protect everything that I've worked for 30 years. Because it would be really terrible if, there was some reason I couldn't do something for, a month, whatever that is. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I just lost everything that I worked for. And so I had to think that through. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I talk about this now. Um, all right. So if you're temporarily unable to run your company, you want, again, educated decisions. I'm not saying all of these are things that you should do or that they're the best things you should do. There are options. So, do you want to have another signer on your bank account? Do you want to have a power of attorney that allows someone to step in if you cannot do it yourself? If you do a power of attorney, here's my helpful hint. If you're going to use that with the bank, you need to talk to your bank and find out what power of attorney they like, because I could write you the greatest power of attorney on the planet and you take it to your bank and they're going to be like, no, we want it on blue paper. And you need to sign it in green. Like, there's always something that they want. So it's always best to ask them um, if they have their own form. Do you want to have another manager? Do you want to, if you're a corporation, are you going to have a vice president that can step in? What's your backup? If you are going to own your business by trust, which is actually a really good idea if you need a trust for other reasons, do you have provisions in your trust to account for a temporary disability? Have you thought about, who within your trust, are your beneficiaries going to sell the business or are they going to just continue to maintain it? So, what happens if you die? um who gets your ownership interest? It is personal property. It's like, if you have a corporation, it's stock. If you have an LLC, it's called member percent interest. um does your interest pass automatically? Are your heirs going to have to go through a probate and incur legal fees to pass your ownership interest? So all probate is, let me dispel all myths. Probate is when you have personal property and some that is owned by someone who's died, and it needs to be transferred to that person's heirs, right? And there was no mechanism created while the owner was alive to pass it automatically. And so what that means is you need to have a judge say, okay, the house goes here, or the business needs to be sold and it's split this way. And so it's not necessarily an adversarial proceeding, but it is a court proceeding. And you end up spending money on legal fees. That's just the way it is. And sometimes you have battles about that. Versus if you've put in effect a beneficiary deed or a trust, then your property passes like that, and there's no question of probate. So the other thing you want to think about is if you die, will your business be able to remain operational? Do you need life insurance? Like, are you, if I died, knock on wood, um, like I'm it, right? So it, having my business continue with Lisa the lawyer would be a big feat because I'm the one that provides the services. So it's, you want to think about that. Do you need to get some life insurance for your business so that it can continue on um, and not have to worry financially while it figures out someone to replace you? Which, by the way, you're irreplaceable. So, um, one of the things you can do with LLCs, and this is LLCs only, is if you have two or more human individuals owning an LLC, they can own it as joint tenants. So if one member dies, that member's ownership automatically passes to the other member, which is a great mechanism. However, um, you need to have a written agreement that says, hey, if that happens, then the heirs of the deceased members get, we're going to value the business and we will pay we'll pay the estate of the deceased members or member, uh, whatever the valuation of the business is. Or you could decide, like, hey, we're just going to have life insurance, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and that would compensate the heirs. Can also do the same thing, community property with right of survivorship. Um, and, so one spouse passes, it passes to the other, and that way you avoid probate because it's automatic. Okay. You can't just say we owned this as community property. You have to have language that says community property with right of survivorship. You, so there has to be something in writing. It has to be signed. So you've got to, if this is something where you're like, oh, this sounds good, it actually is super simple, but you've got to do it correctly. No, no, just like, okay, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna write down CPWROS. You got to do it correctly. So you can also have ownership of LLCs and corporations by a trust. Partnerships too. Limited partnerships can also be owned by a trust. Um, Limited partnerships are so rare that I forget to say them. Um, so you can have your trust own your stock in your corporation, or you can have your trust own your membership percent interest in your LLC. Now, keep in mind, LLCs and corporations are creatures of state statute. So when I'm talking today, I'm talking about Arizona LLCs and corporations. Um, the the overall structure of LLCs and corporations is the same nationwide, but like LLCs in Arizona do not have stock. Like LLCs in Michigan have stock, but LLCs in Arizona do not have stock. So be very careful when you're looking things up on the internet, or you're Googling things. Make sure that you're getting information from an accurate source, that is in your state, because otherwise you're going to use the wrong terminology. Um, you can also look at my website. I have a lot of FAQs about ownership of LLCs and corporations and various things like that if you're interested and you want to make sure that you have Arizona specific information. Again, I talked about it in my horror story. You need to make sure that the trust is listed with the Arizona Corporation Commission as the owner of the business. You can't just be like, well, I'm Lisa and I have a trust. I really meant to do that. My trust owns it. You need to, like, on your K1, if that's what you're doing, on your tax return, like, you've got to follow it. Your business is not a plaything. You've got to treat it like it's a really, really big business, even if you're small, and do all the things appropriately. So, you can also do, or you also need buyout provisions, and they can be whatever you want. You can do a right of first refusal. You can allow a sale to a third party, whatever you want. But here's the thing: if you don't have anything written, If you don't write an operating agreement for your LLC and you have someone else in the LLC that is also an owner, they have the right to sell their ownership interest to whoever they want. It is considered transferable by law, and you don't want that. So you best get something in writing that says your ownership interest in this LLC is not transferable. You can write anything in your operating agreement or in your bylaws, but you definitely want to have buyout provisions. You can even have a separate agreement if you want. Just please have something in writing, preferably not on a cocktail napkin. Um, all right. So, one of the biggest things that you need to do, and Mel's going to talk about this a little bit further, so I'm not trying to steal your thunder, but there are a trillion ways to value your business. Like, you know, there's many, many different formulas, none of which are on the slide. It just was a cool picture of formulas. Um, you can hire a business valuator, which I just had a client do this. She's buying a business and we needed to have it valued, and like the price range was like 3 grand to 10 grand. I mean, it was depending on what you wanted. Um, but that is certainly an option. Just understand that there's a cost associated with it. Again, educated decisions, educated. Be aware. Don't be surprised. You can just choose a formula, any formula. Um, I I have clients that just make stuff up. Preferably not, let's like, flip a coin. Come up with something that has some basis. So I just had a client do 3 years of gross receipts divided by three times the percent ownership interest. And they said, that's the value of the person that's leaving interest, and we're going to pay it over 5 years. Like, it doesn't matter what the formula is as long as everybody agrees on it. And get spouses to sign off as well, even if they're not a part of the business. This is a community property state. They have an ownership in the business unless they have specifically in writing disclaimed it. You want to prevent any fights about it in the future. You want it to be very clear that everybody was on board. And this formula may be silly in the future, but everybody agreed to it. So, silly or not, that's what you got, unless you change it. All right. So, life insurance is a pretty cool buyout provision. Um, I'm a big, big fan. Now, if you are 90 years old, you may have a problem getting life insurance. So this may not be ideal for you, but I throw it out there because it's it cuts out, depending on what you use it for. I think it'd be used for many different ways. Um, but your business entity, your LLC, your corporation can pay for it. It's a deduction. You're going to do life insurance on a key person, and it cuts out your business valuation issue if you're using it for buyout. So what you would do is you would have the ownership, you would have a provision in your operating agreement or your bylaws that says, or a separate agreement that says, in the event Lisa passes away, there's a life insurance policy that is going to her spouse. The beneficiary is her spouse, and it's for $1 million because I'm worth $1 million. Um, and her spouse doesn't get to complain about that. We're saying that that's what the business is worth, and that is what her spouse is going to get, $1 million upon her death. Um, no issue with valuation. We've all decided $1 million. I would be excited if my business was worth $1 million, but um, so the so that is one way to cut out the we have to business value, or we have to pay this over time. You can also have a life insurance, uh, or have the business be a beneficiary of the life insurance, so that when a key person does pass away, the whole point is to make sure that while you're trying to replace that person, or the business continues, that there's not a hiccup. And that's so it's definitely something to consider if it's available to you and it's not ridiculously expensive. So, um, all right. If you are an LLC, one of the things that you should think about, and this is really critical for like single members and two owner LLCs, is you really want to be manager managed. If you are not manager managed and you can tell me why, then great, you can be member managed. So the difference between being manager managed and member managed is members in Arizona are owners of an LLC, and managers are like the hands that run the LLC. I am so sorry. Um, and so if you're member managed, that means anybody who's an owner can do anything for the business. So if you're a single member LLC, of course you're going to do everything. But if you make it manager managed, you can be both the manager and the owner as well. And same with two people. So the managers are the only ones that can do anything for the LLC. And the reason why you want that is because your ownership interest is considered a personal property, which what I was saying, and it's transferable. So if you had someone, if I had someone that was super upset with me and they're suing me and my insurance wouldn't cover it, they could come and take my ownership interest in my corporation or my LLC. And if they did that, I'd be out of luck, right? If I was member managed, because now they control the whole business. But if I'm manager managed and they take my ownership interest, I don't really care because I'm manager managed and I control the management of the business. And I would guarantee my first decision, if that happened, would be that no members get dividends and they get no money. So it's a way to protect yourself from reverse piercing the corporate veil. It's the idea that if some creditor comes after the ownership interest or a bankruptcy trustee comes after that ownership interest, that the management of the company always is maintained by the managers that wish to or that are managing it. So you can be a single member LLC, you can be like Lisa is the owner and Lisa's the manager. And then I could add other managers that are not owners. I could bring in a silent owner, and it gives you some flexibility. So it's something to consider. And again, educated decision. But I have yet to have one person tell me a good reason why they are member managed. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mel for key considerations for your exit strategy on the retirement and financial planning slide.
All right, so let's begin first with a case study. And I have met many Virginias in my 10 years. So Virginia owns a marketing firm, and like many people, she assumed that she'd retire after selling the business. But the deal fell through, and she realized that she had no personal retirement plan other than the business. The business was her retirement plan. And now Virginia is stuck working in her business until she can find a buyer and sell it because she poured all of her financial resources into that business. And she is now sitting with no other retirement streams or any other income other than that business. Now, Virginia is actually a real person. Her name is not Virginia. But Virginia did what so many other business owners do. She poured all of her time, energy, and financial resources into that business, and she didn't take care of her most valuable asset, which is herself. Retirement planning and financial planning should follow the same rules as if you are flying in a plane for business owners. The cabin pressure changes and you are traveling with a small child. You put the oxygen mask on yourself first. So, when we're planning for retirement as business owners, we have to look at more than just the business itself. We like to break this down into the four pillars of planning. First, personal financial planning, because we have to look at our biggest asset, and that is us. So, personal planning, what does your life look like when you step away? What does the day to day look like? What is it going to cost to fund that lifestyle? And where is that income going to come from once the checks and revenue stops coming from the business? The second pillar is investment planning. Right now, for business owners, most of the net worth may be tied up in that business, but that's a lot of eggs in one basket. We have to start building outside assets so our financial futures don't rely on one outcome, which is the eventual sale of that business. So, diversifying income streams is so important. The third is tax planning. The sale of the business can create a big tax event. But as Lisa was saying, with the right structure and timing, we can reduce the tax liability and keep more of that hard-earned equity in your pocket. So tax planning is really important. And the fourth pillar is risk management. Life doesn't always go according to plan. So we put protections in place through insurance, like we were talking about, and the right legal structures to keep your wealth safe and your business protected and also resilient. So, with these four pillars all aligned and working together, retirement becomes a transition on your own terms and not a question mark, or as Lisa illustrated, somebody else's terms. All right, next slide. So let's talk about some of the financial tools in the form of retirement accounts that are at business owners' disposal that you can use to help plan for your own future. So all of these that you see here are examples of pre-taxed retirement accounts. That means that contributions go in before taxes. It reduces your taxable income in the year that you make them. So in other words, every dollar that you contribute is a dollar that you're not paying taxes on today. So here's kind of why that matters. When you're running a business, your income and tax bracket can be a lot higher during your working years than after you retire. That's kind of the conventional wisdom. So using pre-tax accounts allows you to take the deduction now when savings are generally more valuable, and then you pay taxes later when you're likely in a lower tax bracket. So on top of that, the money in these accounts grows tax deferred. So there's no taxes on it while it's investing, it's being invested in compounding, and that kind of accelerates long-term growth. And if the business is making those contributions on your behalf, which it will, that's tax deductible to the business. So the business gets tax benefits and you get retirement savings. And that's a win-win all the way around. So these pre-tax plans help business owners lower taxes today, build wealth for tomorrow, and just create more flow and flexibility for the future. They reduce your tax bill now and fund the lifestyle you want later. So let's take a deeper dive into some of these and how they work and who they work best for. So first up is a solo 401k. And it is called a solo because it is only for one person. If a solo can work for you, it's because it is only you and maybe a spouse, but you cannot have any other full-time employees or just employees in general. So this is for solopreneurs. So this plan gives you the best of both worlds because you can contribute and make contributions as the employer and the employee. So you can potentially put away a lot more money than with any of the other plans. This also gives you the option of choosing Roth, which are pre-tax contributions, and that can give you some flexibility with current and future tax brackets. And if needed, solo 401ks also allow for loans. So it gives you access to funds without derailing other retirement strategies that you may have. So if you're currently the business and the business is currently you, this is usually a good place to start for folks who want to put away a lot of money. That's the solo 401k in a nutshell. Next up is your SEP IRA, Simplified Employee Pension. This is perfect for business owners who want very simple administration. 401ks can be a little bit more costly to administer. So SEPs are great for that simple administration and for the ability to make large employer-only contributions. So a SEP allows you to contribute up to 25% of your compensation, which can really add up as income grows. And it's flexible. Unlike some of the other plans that you'll hear about, there are no mandatory contributions. So in a slow year, you can pause these plans without penalty. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. The only thing that's really important to keep in mind with SEPs is that if you have eligible employees, if you have people working for you, you have to contribute the same percentage as you do for them that you do for yourself. So it's great for solo and smaller businesses, but as your team grows, the SEPs can become expensive fast. So bottom line, it starts simple and really powerful, but it may eventually evolve into something more like a safe harbor 401k as the business scales. But SEPs are great for solopreneurs or smaller businesses, but just remember, you have to contribute the same for you that you do for everybody else. So if 25% compensation sounds great for you, but maybe not for everybody you work with, you may want to look someplace else. All right. Next up, we have the simples. Simple IRA, savings incentive match plan for employees. And you can see they really struggled with that acronym there. These are fantastic starter plans for businesses under 100 employees. They're really inexpensive to administer. Employers can choose to either match up to 3% of compensation or do a non-elective match, 2% of each eligible employee's pay, even if those employees choose to not contribute. So these are fantastic for companies who want to offer something but don't want to have to deal with compliance testing or any of the other fancy, expensive administration pieces. Simples are a great plan to get something going so you can offer things to employees, get retirement savings started. A simple is a great way to go. They are fantastic they're really easy to set up. They're very easy to maintain. There's minimal paperwork involved. The only sort of catch with the simple is they have much lower contribution limits than a 401k or a SEP. So it's really best suited for companies that are just getting started or for growing businesses that want to encourage saving and want to get those retirement plans started. So that's the Cliff's Notes version on the simple. All right. So those are 3 of the major retirement plans that you're going to see out there in the world that are available. And all of them are wonderful ways, once again, for businesses to fund retirement plans, get those tax deductions, and be saving for business owners to fund your long-term retirement. Next up, as Lisa was talking about, business valuations. One of the most overlooked parts that we see in retirement planning for business owners is shockingly knowing what your business is actually worth. Not what we might think it's worth, but what it's actually worth. Not what a colleague's business sold for, but real numbers based on valuation. So regular business valuations do a few things. First, they help track your company's growth and how value is being created over time. It shows what's working and where the business is getting strength. And naturally, it's identifying where value is coming from and where the areas of improvement is needed, especially in exit planning. It is so important to do this about 5 years out, especially if you know that that sale of the business is coming. Setting realistic expectations for sale of transition is especially important when you are coming to valuating the business, and ensuring that personal financial plans are reflecting the true business value. Because the last thing that we want is a disconnect between the personal retirement planning and what your business is actually doing, the income it is actually generating. There has to be a marriage between the two. So regular business valuations are of paramount importance for succession planning and in individual and personal retirement planning. So know what your business is actually worth. All right, so in a nutshell, key takeaways: exit planning and succession planning are very much linked to having a personal retirement plan. We do not want to put all of our eggs in one basket and have the business be a retirement plan. Diversifying income streams is the best way to put that oxygen mask on yourself. And we always want to do it sooner rather than later. In my line of work, I am notorious for saying the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And this can be malleable. It has to be. These plans are flexible. In my world, in retirement planning, life tends to change and look different for folks every 5 years or so. So these plans grow as you grow, as your business grows, and that's what they are created for. Having an exit strategy will provide that peace of mind and hopefully thwart the need to have to, pull that ripcord.
Keep
So
Mr. Murphy away.
exactly, thank you, to
Yeah.
keep Murphy away. So those are some of the tools that we use in personal retirement planning. I will be talking more about those next week, to where it's not just the Cliffs Notes version. And with that, I will kick it back over to Lisa.
First of all, here's our contact information. This is Mel's information. This is my contact information. Again, if you want some more information, you can read my business frequently asked questions, or subscribe to the email list or blog.